Greetings travelers and welcome back to my channel. I hope you guys are staying warm as it is freezing here in Norfolk. A couple of weeks ago, me and the one and only Adam from Dragonlance Saga, one of the best Dragonlance YouTube channels out there, we sat down and talked about the War of the Lance. It was a great conversation, I enjoyed it immensely and I hope you will too, so cue the music. So to start this video off, I'm really pleased to have with me on my channel Adam from Dragonlance Sage. He is one of the best Dragonlance sages out there. I love his videos.
Oh, that's very kind of you. I'm sorry I jump in. I can't take compliments. I appreciate that. Thank you so much. It's a privilege to come on a channel that celebrates Dragonlance as much as I do.
It hasn't been my main focus on the channel for a long time, but now I'm trying to get back into it. I moved across the country, so that kind of put a damper on all of this, but now going full throttle back into Dragonlance.
Oh, that's awesome. The more the merrier.
Finally, there are people on YouTube talking about Dragonlance.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this video is about the War of the Lance. It's the conclusion of the war. And I brought you on here to do it as a discussion instead of just me talking about it.
Yeah, well, again, I certainly appreciate it. And this is, I think for every Dragonlance fan, this is the time period that we are all the most excited about. There's just a ton of mystery and excitement and adventure and plot twists and political machinations going on all across the continent. It's just a lot of fun to talk about this time period, so thanks.
This is the beginning of it all. I mean, everything I talked about before this, from the age of Starbirth until now, it was just history.
Mm-hmm.
This is the true beginning of Dragonlance. I was listening to an interview by Dragonlance Nexus. They interviewed Margaret Weiss and Tracy Hickman.
Mm-hmm.
And Tracy said that the three original characters were Tanis, Lorana, and Kitiara. And I did not know that.
Oh, yeah. They had to represent the balance of not only the balance of the overarching theme of Dragonlance, which is good overcoming evil, but this idea that there has to be a balance in that, you know? I mean, the War of the Lance really separated all the ideas of bad guys versus good guys in the fact that bad guys will always turn on themselves, whereas the good guys are always reluctant to join with each other. And that, just in that idea alone, you have this sort of semblance of balance. The bad guys can't stay in power for too long because they start eating themselves ostensibly. And then the good guys, it takes them so long to get together because of their own prejudices, their own biases, their own political machinations. Again, that's what I love so much about this campaign setting, is that it does have that from the the basic foundational structure of it, that essence of the balance, which is hyper focused on more than any other that I've come to learn about.
Let's say take Forgotten Realms, for instance.
Mm-hmm.
You don't really have good and bad balance. You have good in one spot, you have bad in the other, and bad will do bad things, good will keep to themselves.
Yeah.
Here you have everything trying to mash together, and one wants to assert control over the other. If we go 300 years back, you have the King Priest, that he tried to turn everything good, and that was terrible.
I think that's another aspect of this War of the Lance specifically. It's sort of the reaction to what happened during the Cataclysm, because the Cataclysm is always this ever-present theme throughout the entire War of the Lance, right? Everyone who is not in the know about the dragon armies is really suffering. There's no healers. You have the Seeker movement, but that's all fake. The gods abandoned everyone, but the truth is that everyone abandoned the gods. So we're living in this sort of, almost like the Middle Ages in our own real world, where in education and information was hyper-localized to those of wealth and power, and everyone else was just pushed into the fields to survive, and they were, told as many lies and falsehoods as possible to keep them down, and anyone who tried to buck the system or reveal truth was shut down. And we see this in, with the companions meeting up at the end of the last home in Solace, where Goldmoon and Riverwind are literally ostracized from their tribe because they, have this blue crystal staff that purportedly heals people, and they're sort of kicked out because they're heretics of their own tribe of human beings, plainsmen. I mean, it's a really fascinating idea that so much of information in this world is stifled by the very people that would benefit from the reveal of the information. It's always the good guys. They are their own worst enemy. Because ultimately, if you're not a part of the dragon armies, you're trying your best to do good. It's just everyone suffers from their own biases.
Definitely. Also, when they are at the inn, and God, I forgot the name of the seeker.
Hedrick.
Exactly, Hedrick. He falls into the fire, and Tess uses the staff to heal him, and he puts his hand back in the fire to hurt himself, to show that, no, I'm not taking any of your good stuff. I want to suffer. It makes no sense.
Yeah, that character specifically, throughout his entire history with the companions, from that initial experience, the companions go and flee Solace because clearly the Seekers in Solace have been working secretly with the dragon armies. Hedrick, even when he's rescued by the heroes, he still rejects them, and he's still vying for some semblance of power and control over, the prisoners of Pax Arcas later on. He's actively working against the heroes as the heroes are trying to get them refuge in Thorbarden. It's insane.
He just wants his power, and he feels like the companions, they took it away from him. Yeah. So on the one hand, I understand his need for power because he doesn't want to feel useless, but in that regard, he also helps darkness a lot more. Trying to do good by benefiting your own self, you do a lot more harm.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to, please don't take this in a political direction in the real world, but just as a statement. We see that in real life, and that's why I like so much this campaign world, is because even though it is fantastical and it's set in, this sort of mystical world, it still resonates. The human expressions and the sacrifices and the struggles that these characters, the companions specifically, but also, the sort of secondary and tertiary characters of this saga world, they all struggle with relatable problems and relatable situations, and just working against your own self-interest politically is something that we humans just do from time to time. And it's horrible when you can see it happening, but for Hedrick, just to put yourself in his shoes for a second, he's not concerned about that. He felt like he had a position of power and authority in Solace, and then it was stripped away in a second by just these random people that just showed up, as far as he's concerned, and so ultimately, the going back to how the cataclysm is this ever-present darkness on the world right now, it's encapsulated by the companions and by Goldmoon and Riverwind coming to Solace. They're fleeing their own homes. The companions are returning to their homes, and then they're forced to flee. So this idea that the gods could really exist, upsetting the political and ultimately military resistance to the Dragon High Lords by their sheer presence, is a huge threat to everyone in a position of authority and power, including Hedrick. And so ultimately the companions have to flee, and ultimately they are directed to Zaxaroth and the uncovering of the discs of Mishakal, which will then be this sort of flame, this fire that spreads across all of Ansalon with the return of the gods.
Exactly. Also, I want to jump back a bit to Hedrick. Whether you said that the reason that I believe that he did what he did was he was working with the dragon armies to help himself to stay in power. He was scared. He did all of this out of fear, and once they broke out of the dragon army, he tried to do whatever he can to stay in power so he will have some semblance of safety.
This is ultimately the downfall of all of the conquered nations of Krynn. All of those towns and cities and strongholds that fell to the might of the dragon armies is solely because they wanted to remain with... I mean, look at Sylvanesty as a perfect example. The dragon armies went to... Yeah, he went to Lorak and he was like, look, if you stay isolationist, we will not invade you. And Lorak was like, okay, great, we'll just do what we've always done. Up until the point where the dragon army said, well, now they're not going to attack us, let's invade.
Now, it's not only that, they got into position. They took over Balfour, they took over...
Goodland, yeah.
They conquered everything around them.
Yeah.
And then they just attacked with not one dragon wing. They attacked with the blue, red, and black. And this is something they didn't do in any other nation.
Yeah, I mean, you gotta... I think another interesting point is that there's these established biases with the gods as well. You know, I mean, Takesis has always hated elves solely
Oh yeah,
because her brother Paladine created them. You know.
because elves were created as good,
Yeah.
the ogres were created as evil, and the humans were created as neutral.
Yep.
That's how the balance worked. They had three races, each one represented one god. And of course she wants to go after the elves.
Yeah.
They are
Absolutely.
her natural enemies.
Ultimately, reflecting back on the War of the Lance, if you just think of it in terms of crushing the spirit of the good people of Krynn, I actually think the Queen of Darkness won. She, like, they did ultimately at the Whitestone Council come together, but even then there were biases. And then once the war ended, I don't want to jump ahead this quickly, but just to make my point, once the war ended, they still hated and distrusted each other, even though they just
That's
worked
amazing.
together to defeat the Dark Queen. So I can't help but think that maybe she did win ultimately,
Ultimately, I do agree with that. I mean,
especially against the elves because they have suffered so
oh yeah.
long.
And after that,
Yeah.
it was downhill from there on in
Oh,
for
it's
both nations.
yeah. I mean, it all starts with Lorak and Cyan Bloodbane, and it just from
Oh yeah.
there it just goes down. I mean, ultimately, there is some lore that says that Fistandantilus convinced Lorak to take the Dragon Orb out of the Tower of High Sorcery. I think it was in Istar when he was doing his test, and
Yeah.
spirited away to Sylvanesty, which is sort of what set in motion all of the potential of the elves' downfall. And we all know that Fistandantilus made a deal with Takesis in order to maintain eternal life, so maybe she was operating with the idea of destroying the elves all the way back at the Cataclysm.
I won't be surprised at that. She
Yeah,
plays the long game. She is not a stupid or fast acting person. She's not a person. She's a god.
right. Yeah.
But she always has plans upon plans upon plans of how to progress. Her main downfall every single time were her armies, her leaders.
Yeah. Evil feeds upon itself, and that just up until, after, when you got the Knights of Takesis and stuff, it started changing. But the dichotomy in the War of the Lance era, that was the downfall of the War of the Lance. And let's look at this. If it wasn't for each of the High Lords vying for positions of authority, I honestly think they would have won. Kitiara came to Lord Ericus and said, "Look, I want to take Solemnia. I want to press on to the High Clerist's Tower." And he was afraid that she would get too much more renown than she already had, too much more cachet with the other High Lords that she could then usurp him. And so he was like, no, how about instead you just send the Solemnic Knights on a goose chase to the ice wall after another Dragon Orb. If he would have said, yes, do it, they would have
Yeah.
taken them completely by surprise and off guard. I mean, as it was when they actually ended up assaulting the High Clerist's Tower, they were taken off guard in the winter. So,
They would have won.
yeah,
No problem at all. You're talking back, I think it was 351.
yeah,
This is before Storm's
yep,
death on the High Clerist's Tower. This is about a year, 2 years before that. If they would have attacked back then, there is no stopping her. She would have
yeah.
taken Palanthas easily.
I mean, she'd already struck across the Dargard Mountains. She had already occupied Kalaman, Hinterlund, and Nightland. And
Yep.
if they just kept going, they completely would have taken the plains of Solemnia and Garldland. I mean, they would have owned Ansalon at that point because no one in the southern Ansalon or Abanasinia would have been able to do anything against them. But it was,
Dwarves were fighting back.
yeah,
And then that gave them the reprise for Solamnia to get entrenched.
yep,
But even with that, even with the knights being entrenched, it wouldn't stop dragons when you don't have any way to fight them.
yeah, yeah.
They didn't have the good dragons, they didn't have the Dragonlance or the Dragon Orbs. Nothing could stop the dragons back then.
Yeah, I honestly believe if it wasn't for the Majir family, specifically Kitiara and Raistlin, and Karaman by proxy in assisting Raistlin, the Queen of Darkness probably would have taken over because it was Kitiara's distractions and her own vying for power that and Ericus's attempt to squash her rising power that took their focus off of the prize of Solemnia. It was Raistlin Majir that took over the dragon orb of Sylvanesty, and we can make the argument, and I think it's fair to make, that it wasn't Raistlin, it was Fistendanilus, because he literally gave himself up to it.
Back then, 100% it was Fistendanilus.
Yeah.
There's no doubt in my mind that Raistlin was not strong enough. After the end of the war, he had more than enough power to take over.
For sure, yeah. Yeah, I think ultimately that started happening near the end of the War of the Lance. But by the time he gets to Naraka at the Temple of Takhisis, the Temple of Luricus, he's in a position of absolute control. I mean, he still is fighting with Fistendanilus, but he has the upper hand. And again, if it wasn't for the Magirs, if it wasn't for Raistlin, I think the Queen would have won. I think she would have completely done it. It was Raistlin that helped Beren the Everman actually succeed in doing what he wanted to do. If it wasn't for Raistlin,
destroyed her forces. He
Yeah.
gave him the opening. I mean, using Fistendantilus's power, of course.
yeah, ultimately the bitter irony of the Queen of Darkness is that she empowers individuals to such a state that they are then either directly or indirectly used against her, and they're her own defeat. It's really crazy. Fistendanilus, she made a deal with him back in the day for eternal life, and it ended up being him that empowered the guy to defeat her. It's kind of crazy.
He did not plan on being forded.
No,
In the temple, he was planning on taking over the body of Raistlin and finally being in control again, having a corporeal form.
Mm-hmm.
That was his plan. The fact that Raistlin was able to take over, that's incredible. That's incredible for itself. That shows how strong of a character he is.
Yeah, I mean, this is also personified, after the War of the Lance, where Raistlin's actually successful in maintaining the gate in Zakar in order to enter the abyss when Fistendanilus failed to do so.
Yeah.
So it really drives home the fact that Raistlin, the Majir family, they are incredibly powerful, and they have this massive impact on all of Krynn without Krynn fully recognizing all of it, I think.
I think that it's good that Krynn doesn't fully recognize it, because if they would have, events would have turned out a lot differently.
Yeah.
I mean, stuff like the wizards would have tried to stop him from opening a gate to the abyss, for instance, or going back in time.
Yeah.
There would have been a lot more opposition against Raistlin. And, well, Kitiara was one of the biggest reveals that shocked me when I read the book for the first time when I was 14, 15.
Mm-hmm.
You read the first book, they're looking for Kitiara,
Yeah.
You don't know who this girl is. You know it's Stannis' love interest. You know she was a wily mercenary that enjoyed life. And then you find out that she turned to the dark side. She followed a path that none of them took. And she became a Dragon High Lord, essentially.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for
Now
sure.
that surprised me a lot when I read it the first time. I'm reading and I thought that they knew.
Oh,
That's
really?
how surprised I was. I thought that they actually knew that she was working with the Dragon Arm. And when they find out that she wasn't, that was where my shock was.
When you found out that she wasn't working with the Dragon Army, but she was a High Lord?
When I found out that she was a High Lord and
Right.
working with the Dragon Army, I thought that the companions knew that she transferred over to the dark side.
Oh, right.
But when they found out that she didn't, they were all shocked. I realized that they had no idea. No one knew.
Yeah. I mean, she
not
went
like-
out of her way to just focus on her career, ostensibly,
After she parted ways with Storm and she gave up her baby, she just vanished.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, going back to the progress of the war, as soon as the dragon armies discovered that Sylvanesty was corrupted and the elves fled to southern Ergoth, they knew they didn't have to worry about that as a potential threat, and so they could focus on Abanasinia and sending the red dragon army led by Verminard, which is another beautiful poetic note that I think it was the second Dragon War with Huma Dragonbane, with the aid of Paladine, banished Takhisis, and then his descendant, who is Verminard, is then corrupted to be the first evil priest of the Queen of Darkness. I mean, if that's not
only
poetic.
The first evil priest, he was the first true priest in
Yeah.
Krynn since the Cataclysm. That's incredible. It's incredible so that she was able to seduce him, essentially, and corrupt him completely.
And I think that's a testament to how corrupt the Knights of Solemnia were, because he was an illegitimate son of a Knight of Solemnia that was, the descendant of Huma Dragonbane,
Druid,
supposedly.
I think, or something like that.
Yeah. So the Knights of Solemnia, they also are their own worst enemy. They're focused so hard on the oath and the measure to guide truth, justice, and the Solamnic way of life, and it ends up biting them in the butt.
Of course, it's a problem when you are true order. They weren't good or evil. They were true order.
Yeah.
You had rules and regulations, and if you veer from it one step to either way, you're killed, or you're disbanded, or you're dishonored and throw away. Like Storm's father, you lose your honor and you leave. You have to have flexibility, and that's why we have lawyers to work within the law, but flexible.
Yeah,
and also back then, the Solemnic Knights were in a terrible disarray, power fighting and getting chased off of their lands by the peasants. Essentially, everybody blames them for the cataclysm. It wasn't a good time to be a knight.
Yeah, they ended up becoming very much like the Seekers and like Hedrick the Theocrat, because ultimately Derek Crownguard was just doing what he did, maintain power. He wanted to usurp Gunther Uthwistan. He wanted to be the one in charge of the knighthood, and be damned anything that got in the way, even logic, reason, and winning the war.
None of that mattered to him.
Yeah,
and
it's crazy.
The funny thing is when the group meets him in Tarsus, and essentially he saves a part of the group. Him and Arin and Brian, they save a part of the group from the dragon army. Back then, they're on a mission, and that's it. They have their mission to discover the dragon orbs.
By courtesy of Kitiara in disguise.
That's also true. When she tried to kill Lorana.
Yeah, that was awesome. That was so great. I love the interplay. Again, the entire War of the Lance, of course, it's encapsulated with that good, evil, neutrality theme, but we're seeing it played out with the characters, between, as you started the conversation with Lorana, Kitiara, and Tanis. They're constantly in struggle with each other. One wants one doesn't want that one wants another one, the other one doesn't even know they exist. Then they find out that they're back together and she gets all jealous. Kitiara literally abandons her army to fly down to Tarsus to look for this girl because she thought that Tanis liked her more. I liked him more. It's insane.
That's jealousy. That's true jealousy that's driving people to do stupid stuff.
Yeah, it's so funny. But I think it works for the character, and I don't like to extrapolate out to any sort of greater meaning that the authors are trying to write. I just don't like this idea, and we see it over and over again, which is why I feel like it's important to bring up. Every empowered woman in this is desperately trying to either prove themselves to themselves or prove themselves to someone else, but ultimately they're chasing a man. And, Kitiara is constantly, she's using men like men use women and, just sort of having her way with them until she realizes that Tanis doesn't want her and only her. And then she goes to beat up the girl that he wants, or she thinks he wants. And,
loses it completely back over in Tarsus. She loses it completely.
Yeah.
And disregarding her men and just going after her alone. It's the best and the easiest way for her to get killed.
If it wasn't for her draconian aid, she might have been overpowered by Lorana.
Oh, yeah. Slith was amazing. I love Slith, personally.
Yeah, he's great.
From
Dragons of the Hourglass Mage.
Hourglass Mage, exactly. Yeah. That's the name of the book. Yeah, so there you see how awesome he is.
Well, I think that sets Kitiara apart against all of the other High Lords, is that we're led to believe that all of the other Dragon High Lords see everyone that works for them as underlings, as pawns, as tools. Whereas Kitiara, she made close relationships with her Draconians and made them bodyguards, learned their language. She was communicating with them on a level that no other High Lord even bothered. So everyone respected her and just feared everyone else. And so when it came time for her to make wildly irrational requests to her dragon Kelendros, hey, let's fly down to Tarsus instead of going back to Naraka like we're told to. He does it because he trusts her.
Yeah, and Kelendros, this guy, trusts her completely. He was also in love with her.
Yeah,
as we all know. That's another love triangle that it's better not to explore right now.
Yeah, I don't want to get in the middle of Kelendros, Lord Soth, and Kitiara.
Oh my God, that's a horrible
mess.
That's a horrible place for her to be in.
I would just love to, if there was ever a chance that we could have had that scene where Kitiara's soul is either in the abyss or in the ethereal plane, and Kellandros and Lord Soth like come across her together, and they're like, "Oh wait, you're into her too? What?"
Start battling.
Yeah.
And
Oh,
this is
God.
when Calandros was a Dragon High Lord.
Yeah.
So he was immensely powerful, and it probably would have been a fairly equal fight.
I don't know, man. Lord Soth is pretty tough. I
Oh
don't
yeah.
know. I would like to see it on paper for sure. I think it'd
Oh,
be
of
fun.
course, 100%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Pax Tharkas was that turning point, when the heroes killed Verminard and there became this huge power vacuum in the Dragon High Lords. Who would have thought that Lord Toad would be the one?
Oh my God, I love Lord Toad.
He's
The Hobgoblin High Master.
it's so great. He's only worried about his appearance. He doesn't actually want to make decisions or be in a position of authority. He just wants people to see him in a position of authority.
Yeah, and he wants to be the puppet king.
Yeah.
He is the first character I've ever seen that wants to be a puppet king. He is more than happy of having other people tell him what to do, and he does it as long as he sits on the throne.
Yeah.
And that's
He's
incredible.
funny. He's so funny.
Oh yeah. What amazed me with the battle against Verminard is that they needed all of them essentially to kill him.
Yeah.
It wasn't just Caramon and Rislin fighting him. It was also Galdmoon, Riverwind, Gilthanas, and
Tanis and Sturm were up in there.
yeah, Thanos and Sturm. Everybody were fighting him except for Tess and Fizban.
Yeah, I haven't read that novel by Michael Williams, and it bugs me because I just had an interview with him. I'm really interested in that character of Verminard. I mean, we talked about his legacy of where he comes from because he literally went toes with every one of the companions, and I honestly don't know anyone outside of Ericus that could have done that. I don't think Kitiara could do that.
No, there's no way that Kitiara had enough power to do that. She was an excellent swordsman, and she could probably go toe-to-toe with one or two of them. But fighting against Osso Sword and Osso Magic, when you have Rislin and Caramon that they are used to using, to combining both of their strength in battle,
Yeah.
she wouldn't last.
And Fieldfast wouldn't have even lasted that long, I don't think.
Fieldfast didn't.
Yeah, I mean, Lorana literally put him in his place. I mean, they took
yeah.
casualties, so it wasn't like it was an unfair advantage or anything. But yeah,
It wasn't a good adventure, but
Yeah.
she still put him in his place.
Yeah.
And yeah, the fact that they needed all five of them, six, to defeat him, it's mind-boggling. And his dragon was cut down by the older dragon that was taking care of the kids is hilarious.
It's great. It's just great. Well, I'm going to extrapolate here. This is just my own personal experience. I love the idea of character motivation and growth. And when you see something that's supposed to be a bad guy, a ancient red dragon who, is so far along in their age that they can't even really see well, and they're really only concerned about their children. Their children aren't even dragons, and I'm not sure whether
I don't think she knew that her children were not dragons. I don't think she considered them as human.
Yeah, she definitely considered 100% as her children. It's just whether or not there was a level in her mind that she understood that they were not dragons, or that she believed that they were always dragons, that I always kind of teeter-totter on, because I don't think to her at her age it mattered as much as she was put in a position of care over them. And so by extension, they were definitely her children.
Children, maybe not by blood,
Right.
but by water. And her dementia helped push her to that to that place where you're my kids and that's it. It doesn't matter who you are. She can't see very well. All she knows is that they make children noise and they play around her and they love her.
Yeah, so when Pyros is like, I'm going to, kill everyone, and she really thinks that her children are dead or dying, she doesn't care that she's a red dragon. She doesn't care that she's on the side of the Dark Queen. All she knows is, my children are in danger or dying, and I'm going to destroy the person that's doing it. And she does, and I just love that so much. A lot of people that reflect on that, I hear these ideas that, it's a cop-out just to get a dragon gone, use another dragon to kill another dragon. But there's some character development behind it. And because of that, I think it's great.
Yeah, I agree with that. The thing is, she was not acting out of character against the Dark Queen.
Yeah.
Because red dragons are as egotistical as they come.
Yeah.
She was acting out of character for a red dragon. Because they're self-centered. They only care about themselves.
Yep.
I think the only reason why she did it is because she was so far in age that she was losing herself and turning into something else.
Yeah, I agree with you. Absolutely.
Yeah,
Age
sad.
does that for you. it changes your perspective on a great many things.
100% correct.
The older I get, the more I'm like, oh man, I used to be so concerned about X or Y, and I just don't care anymore.
I used to be such an idiot back
Yeah.
then. Back then is Tuesday.
Yeah. I always found it interesting that the campaign world called Dragonlance ultimately centers around the idea of finding one. Like discovering them. And it takes us to the second novel and them traveling to Ice Reach to confront Fieldthas over the Dragon Orb to actually just stumble across a broken one.
By
And
accident.
and to realize that it is a real thing and it is an opportunity to actually be effective at fighting the Dragon High Lord armies. Because up until that point, they were just looking for the Dragon Orb to do that heavy lifting.
Yeah, that's 100% true. I never thought about that part. That the name of the book, the name of the campaign, they didn't know exist.
Yeah. I mean, it was myths and legends just like dragons were, but even Solemnic Knights were losing faith that the Huma Dragonbane myth was even anything
real.
other than a myth.
Yeah, that's when they finally make it to Huma's tomb.
Yeah.
The knights
so
were awestruck. I don't remember their exact reaction, but they gained faith again.
Yeah, and ultimately, Derek, Sturm, and something else was sent off by Silvara to go back to the settlement of Gunther Wistan with the Dragon Orb. So they didn't even know about Dragonlances until Lorana and the companions delivered them, to them at the Whitestone Council. And ultimately, it wasn't even the Whitestone Council. It was Palanthas.
It was the Whitestone Council.
Yeah, Theros.
So Theros threw one through the Whitestone, shattering the stone and having it stick out of it.
An event only eclipsed by Tasselhoff Burfoot breaking the Dragon Orb.
So yeah, after they went to Ice Reach, this is after the group was shattered into two.
Well, Lorana, Flint, Tasselhoff, Silvara, Gilthanas, they all went to Southern Ergoth and Ice Reach and then Southern Ergoth.
Yeah, and then you had also Derek, Brian, and Aran that also joined with them. They all went down to Ice Reach to find the Dragon Orb, and from there on their way to Sanskrit, they got attacked by Sleet.
Yeah.
Sleet was the white dragon that belonged to Thilthas.
Yeah.
She lost her master and she was going crazy.
Yeah, you got to be frustrated as those heroes on that ship sailing to Southern Ergoth and hoping that you can reach Northern Ergoth because you think we went down to the Dragon High Lord and we just cut the hugest break ever by not running into his dragon. How awesome is that? And then on the way out, they run into him.
And then the dragon tracks them down and almost kills them.
Like, it's all over. Can you just leave, please?
Yeah, and then they get blown into Southern Ergoth by accident. That's where they meet Silvara.
Yeah. I mean, that's where we really are introduced to the true racism of the elves. Because up until that point, we haven't really been exposed to it at all.
And you see them turning the Kagonasti, the wild elves, into slaves.
Yeah.
I mean, they're your same race.
Yeah. I mean, they don't see it that way, which is just bananas to me. I mean, the truth is they're separated by millennia, I mean, their cultures are so different.
It all started in the first Dragon War.
Yep.
That Sylvanesti and Kagonest, or whatever his name was.
Yeah, there was Kagonos and Sylvanos.
Yeah, Kagonos and Sylvanos, and they both chose completely different paths of life.
Yeah.
Kagonos was unwilling to yield to Sylvanos.
I'm not going to quote it exactly, but there's a note that's made to Lorana that I think is from Silvara, actually, before she revealed herself, where before she helped her escape with the Dragon Orb. She was in, what's the name of the city? It's not Quelanost, but it's the makeshift town they made in Southern Ergoth.
Yeah, you had
anyway,
Sylvamesti, something like that, and it's with an N instead of an M or something like that.
Yeah, well, whatever it is, Qualamori, that's what it is. When they were in Qualamori, they were saying that younger Kagonosti elves were being lured and they were attracted to the styles, technology, and advancement of their Qualamasti and Sylvanesti brothers and sisters. And so it was this experience of a native people's learning about a more civilized people's way of life and sort of style and trinkets, ostensibly, and just being sort of drawn to it. And, we saw this in our own cultures with expansionism and the sort of wholesale destruction of the Americas when Europeans came over and decimated the native peoples, and we saw a lot of absorption of those peoples in this new European culture. Not passing to I'm not trying to make anything political, but just the idea that that's what the Khaganate were going through. They were literally enslaved through their class system. The Sylvanesti were terrible for that, but we're led to believe that races are supposed to be good. And we find out that they're not.
That's what I love about this campaign setting, is what is good is never really good.
Yeah.
And the bad, you always could find good in the bad. So if you take, let's say, the Minotaurs, they're evil, yes, and they'll take slaves, but they believe in honor, exactly like the Knights.
Yeah.
And they really respect the Knights of Solemnia because of the honor. Yep. And then you have the elves that are supposed to be the children of the gods of good, and they are slave runners, and they're terrible.
Yeah, it's wild. It just makes for a really rich world, I mean, not everything is cut and dry, black and white. It's presented that way, but every time you get political or socio-political situations involved, it will always degenerate to self-interest and power. Trying to maintain power.
Beautiful thing is, it makes it feel more real.
Yeah.
These are actual people. The fact that an elf should be good, it doesn't mean that elf is good.
Mm-hmm.
Take Dalamar the Dark, for instance, that he turned to black robes. If the elves didn't shun him, maybe he wouldn't. Maybe he would have just worn red.
Well, and that's the other thing, is that simply because someone embraces the black robes of Nuatori does not mean that they're evil. We have Raceland doing genuinely good things. He defeats the Queen of Darkness.
Raceland over and over says that the reason why he's traveling with them is because his goals align with theirs.
Yep.
When the group are running out of
Flotsam.
Yeah, and Kitiara finds out, and she chases them with her dragon, and she blows them to smithereens.
Yeah.
And the storm takes down the ship. Raceland is poof, out of there. Doesn't save his brother. Nobody, he departs.
Yeah, I blame Barum the Everman for that one. He was like, I would rather die in the Blood Sea than be taken by the Dark Queen, and you're all coming with me.
And the thing is, he knew that he would never die, so
yeah.
What's the worst that could happen?
This guy.
There's a part of me that feels really bad for him.
Yeah, talk about an unjust response to an action. He saw a gem and he was like, oh, this is cool. I'm going to take this because we're poor and we're destitute and we're going to die. And that ended up making him painfully immortal and hunted by the Queen of Darkness just because he didn't want to starve.
Well, his sister did try to stop him, and he did push her, and she hit her head on the rock and died.
Yeah, but it wasn't intentional. Like, you can't.
No, it wasn't. It wouldn't be. It wouldn't be murder. It would be at most manslaughter.
Yeah.
He should get a punishment, but it wasn't intentional. He never wanted to harm his sister.
It was hundreds of years, right, that he was suffering?
300 years, something like that. It's like 30. If I remember correctly, the foundation stone was brought up 36 years after the cataclysm, and this happened like 40 or 50 years later, something like that. So
that's a long punishment for anyone to go through.
It's mainly he was punishing himself.
Yeah.
Because once he forgave himself for what he did, he was released.
Yeah, another perfect example of we are always our own worst enemies.
Exactly, and that's why, for instance, veering off topic completely, I really like the way they do punishment on Lucifer, where you're in hell, but you're punishing yourself.
Oh, right. So like
your guilt.
Yeah, like the Catholicism or the Milton view of Lucifer.
Yeah, that your guilt is what keeps you in hell.
Yeah.
I kind of like that. So this is exactly the same thing with the Everman, but instead of dead, he just stays alive forever.
Right. Yeah, and so, as soon as the Dragonlances are collected in Palanthas and they decide that they can actually fight this battle, the Blue Dragon army assaults the High Clerist's Tower. And oh boy, do we see some real loss here. Not only does Derek take out like a third of the Knights of Solemnia to a full-on slaughter.
Going to be a slaughter. The sad thing is, they came to the city of Palanthas with Dragonlance, and the city of Palanthas said, no, we're not going to give you our army. If you want to defend the High Clerist's Tower, it's up to you.
Yep.
We're not going to intervene. And the sad part about it is if they got through the High Clerist's tower, Atlantis is wide open.
Yep.
They
I would probably make an argument that you got flying citadels, you got dragons, you could go over those mountains. If you really wanted to assault Palanthas, I feel like they could have done it. But
They had dragons. Did they know about the flying citadels back then?
well, I mean, they used them to stave off the Kalaman assault, and so the dragon army had them.
Yeah.
It's just they didn't use
for
them.
Sure. They had 5. I think they only used them after the defeat in the High Clerist tower.
Yeah. I was just making a point that if they had them, they could have just bypassed the High Clerist Tower altogether. There was no reason to go through it. But I think ultimately, strategically, it's a point to be made. You know, the Dragon Army is like, look, we need to squash the Knights of Solemnia. They are the shining beacon of light for all of the peoples of Krynn, even though everyone's rejected them. If we can even defeat them at their own home, the highest Clerist Tower, then no one will oppose us. And of course, Palanthas had made a deal with the Dragon Army saying, look, we will not invade you if you stay out of the war. And that's why they rejected the Knights of Solemnia's request for aid.
Of course, but it's the same story with Solvadesti. They would have turned on them.
That worked out so well.
Of course.
Yeah, I love this.
Also, the thing is with the High Clerist Tower, who created it, who built it? Venus Solemnis, the creator of the Solemnic nation, the creator of the Solemnic Knights.
Yeah.
If they take that tower, it's a moral hit for the Solemnic Knights. That would devastate them completely. They wouldn't lose the war physically, they would lose it mentally.
Yep.
I mean, the tower never fell until the Chaos War. But
right. But I mean, ultimately, you know, we have the malleability of the remaining Knights of Solemnia, personified through Stern Brightblade and Gunther Wistan, and Lorana as the Golden General. To thank. She trained them how to use the Dragonlances, and I don't know how. It never even tries to explain how, but she's the only person without any magical instruction to be able to control a dragon orb.
I think they said that it was her sheer determination that made it happen.
I mean, that's just amazing.
It's unbelievable. The fact that it almost took over Rislin when he was trying to do it for the first time.
Exactly.
And he needed the help of Phizandantilus to take over the orb, and she did it by herself.
Yeah. I mean, we're first introduced to the Dragon Orb because it took over a king and destroyed his nation. And so, you know, we're only believing that Raistlin could have done it because Phizandantilus took over and did it, and we're led to believe that Phizandantilus is a super ooky bad guy that we have no information of really as of yet. You know, we're told that he's this super bad guy. So we're like, okay, well, the big bad guy from history who's taken over Raistlin, that's why he was capable of doing it. But then Lorana comes and she's like, no, I'm doing this thing.
And I have no training. When Laura Calderon was a mage for what, 500-600 years?
Yeah. Like, I mean, like 1,000. Oh, yeah. I mean, it was like 500 years or something like that. Yeah.
Because he took it before the Cataclysm. He went back to Ishtar. That's where he did his test.
Yeah, and that was only 340 years ago. Yeah.
Yeah. I think he was around 500 or 600 years old when he died.
Yeah.
And Lorana, nothing. It's incredible. And all of this is because Tess, by accident, finds the orb hidden away in the High Clerist Tower.
Yeah, I thought that was a really great reveal, too, is that the High Clerist Tower was actually a trap. Yeah. I mean, it's so wonderful when you have these little moments. You're led to believe this is a stronghold. This is a sort of a last stand before all of Solemnia is taken over, and they will stay here and fight to the death, and they realize we're fighting to the death on top of a weapon. Like, this thing can be used to our benefit. And it was the first of a couple, but the very first defeat of the Blue Dragon Army. Kitiara was flying high on defeat of everyone that stood in her way. She was just whipping everyone's tuchus.
Yeah, 100%. She was unstoppable.
Yeah.
The funny thing is when they get there and Flint looks at it, and he mentions, why does a tower have more than one door?
Yeah.
He puts it out there. He said, why is it open to 4 different directions? It's not defendable. And then you finally learn that, oh my god, yeah, it's built to trap and kill dragons.
It's awesome. It was a great reveal.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so after that first defeat of Kitiara's, everything changes. She not only has, you know, her second face-to-face with Lorana, but she kills the man that impregnated her.
I'm not surprised she killed him.
Yeah, I'm not either.
at all, and that wasn't the saddest death of these books.
What was the
Storm was
saddest one for you?
Flint.
Oh,
Flint
that was
made
brutal.
me cry.
Yeah.
I cried. I read the book again a year ago, and I cried when I read Flint die. And I
Yeah.
knew that he's going to die. That's how much it touched me the way he died, because it was pointless.
It wasn't even just his death. It was how it affected everyone else. Tanis
Yeah.
literally killed the Everman until he, came back because he can't be killed because he thought that the Everman killed his best friend since childhood. The only one that treated him like a real person.
Flint was more of a father to Tanis than
Yeah.
any of his parents.
Yeah. Well, for sure.
I
Yeah.
mean, and Tess fell apart,
Oh, Taz that was horrible.
crying, and
Ugh.
Anders never, and it changed him forever.
Yeah, I think a lot of what happens in these books is vicariously through Tasselhoff's reactions, because we're led to believe that he's this fearless, joyful spirit, and then we see these events start to diminish that light within him. And that hurts, so we can feel the true gravity of these events through the destruction of innocence of this species, this person, this character that's supposed to be indestructible in their joyful spirit.
The death of innocence.
Yeah, it's tragic. It's just tragic. And it's just so beautiful. Yeah, Flynn's death was horrible, especially coming off of the back of this wonderful scene when Lorana is attacking the Blue Dragon army from Kalaman, and Flint and Tasselhoff are on the back of a dragon, and they attack Barris's, I think his name is, dragon, and they end up capturing him totally by accident because the dragons got caught up together. But it was just this wonderful experience of Tasselhoff just having this joyous moment, flying on a dragon, Flint freaking out because he doesn't want to fly on a dragon.
When the brass dragon talks to him, your benevolent sir, and tries to convince him by talking up to him and making him feel like an elder, someone to respect.
Yep.
And that was the only reason why Flint got on the dragon in the first place. Tess
good.
leaves the dragon and jumps on the other one to capture the guy. I mean, it was an amazing fight.
Yeah, that part of the book was just so much fun to read.
Oh my god!
But then those joyful moments juxtaposed against God's Home, where we do see Flint die. I mean, that was just like, oh, oh man. I mean, to be fair, they were leading us up to that death for a while.
He was old, and he was
Yeah.
complaining that his heart was hurting, that his left arm was hurting.
And there's a hereditary thing from his dad.
Yeah, if you could read between the lines and the way he was acting, you knew that he had heart problems.
Yeah.
The thing is, in the High Clerist Tower, when they come up and they see Storm dying, they see Kitiara. I don't understand why Kitiara didn't kill Lorana over there. I don't understand why she didn't do it.
Yeah, I mean, militarily, I think it would have made perfect sense to just kill her, just get it done with. It would have saved the war. But
Yeah.
I think Kitiara is, Lord Soth respects Kitiara because he sees her as controlling her passions. But the truth is, she doesn't. That's just a front she
Driven
puts
by
up.
that.
And when she saw Lorana and she reflected immediately back to Tanis and she saw how powerful Lorana looked, she already faced off against her once on herself. It's mad respect there. She's like, look.
She also says, listen, Tanis is working with me now. He's
Yeah.
part of my army.
Just
and
digging
she's
in.
bragging. Yeah, of course. That was the whole point. It was just to be an a-hole to her. Just to show off, hey, Tanis is waiting in my bed.
Yeah, you think you're hot stuff? I got your man meat back here in my house.
And that's why she leaves.
Yeah.
She leaves back across the entire continent to go back and be with Tanis.
Yeah. I hope people aren't trying to follow us like point A to point B
methodically?
in our conversation because we're jumping all over.
I'll definitely do another video that actually chronologically follows the war because I've been thinking about that.
Yeah.
This is an awesome conversation, first of all. I'm really enjoying this. As a chronological lore of what's going on in the war, no, this is terrible.
Yeah. Sorry, people. Right. I mean, we're really at the point where Kitiara realizes that Lorana's a genuine threat militarily, and she needs to squash that threat. And she's going to
I
use.
don't understand why she didn't kill her.
I know. It's just. I mean, but you can extrapolate that back to the beginning of our conversation of why Eric has
Yeah.
told her not to assault the High Claire's tower when she would have swept through the whole place.
Oh yeah, it's everybody's working against everybody else.
Yeah.
That's the beauty of it. Evil always fights upon itself or eats itself.
Yeah. They're
And then she
cannibals.
loses.
They're all
Yeah.
cannibals. They ate each other up. Yeah. So there's the Shining reference.
Some of them were.
I really like I say I like this, but it actually for me feels like a conflict of character, and it's the only conflict of character that I struggle with. But the fact that Laurana has been fighting this war literally as a general for I think
Yeah.
months at this point. She went from winter to spring, and it's now that she's like, I'm just going to give this all up so I can chase after Tanis because they said they want to do a messenger swap. Now, I have long arguments with people about this, whether or not it's in character and whether or not it was breaking any rules that she did what she did. I think it's breaking a character role because she grew so much that she admitted she didn't need Tanis at that point. And she was devoted to the cause of the Whitestone armies at that point. And for her to then take her prisoner of war in secret in the middle of night to spirit him away to trade him for Tanis when there's a war going on. There's people's lives at stake more than just the one Tanis. I think that was short-sighted as a character, and I don't understand it.
So at the beginning of the war, when she joins them, she follows them into Paxtaros.
Mm-hmm.
She's hiding away because she's a child, and
Right.
she's in love with Tanis, and this is what a child does. That instant when she takes the prisoner, convinces Flint and Tess,
Yeah.
she convinces them to come with her. They came to protect her, to see that it's not an ambush, but of
Yep.
course it was.
Yep.
It kind of reverts her back to what she was a year and a half before that,
Yeah.
to the little kid.
It-
I never thought about the conflict. I never thought about that.
It's always bothered me. It's always bothered me. I mean, send a proxy or something, but for you, the literal general of the armies, why would you be the one to leave? And I understand for her it's personal because, again, it's Kitiara. They're sexual rivals over Tanis. They're the personification
Silver
of...
dragons.
Yeah. I mean...
Have 5 silver dragons polymorph into humans, or polymorph into mounts.
Yeah.
Have 5 horses that are actually silver dragons. Ride in, and then when shit hits the fan, because we all know it will, they could just fly out of there.
Yeah.
I mean, you're a general, you have the power. She did it as a stupid little girl again.
Yeah, so is this a moment of brilliance for Kitiara, knowing that she would take the bait? Laurana would take the bait? Or is this a moment of sheer weakness for Laurana to have taken the bait?
Kitiara, first of all, placed the doubt in her back in the High Claire's tower.
Yep.
She told her that Tanis is in her bed and that she got her man. And then I think that because she was told that Tanis got injured in battle, maybe Laurana has some doubt and some guilt that maybe it's one of her assaults. Maybe it's one of her soldiers that hit Tanis. Maybe it's her fault that Tanis is dying.
Right.
So that could have also driven her to that state, that she felt guilty.
I could see that.
Maybe after Kitiara told her about Tanis, so she felt she didn't need him anymore.
Mm-hmm.
She was her own person. Finally, Laurana is her own person.
Yeah.
And like you said, for months, the Vanguard assault was about 3 weeks where she decimated both the blue and the black armies, the green armies later, also the white armies. She was in total control. And then she gets these doubts. And the report from Kitiara saying that, hey, Tanis is dying. And the smart thing with Kitiara, she didn't come over and say, hey, I'll trade you Tanis for my lieutenant. She told her straight up, he's dying. If you want to see him before he dies, you better come.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's to me maybe the reason why she started to lose herself again.
I can see that. Yeah. I mean, ultimately, she does get captured by Lord Soth and taken as a sort of sacrifice. Kitiara promises Lord Soth Laurana's soul after the Dark Queen has killed her. And then that's
and
where...
possesses her body to enter the world.
Yeah. Yeah. And she's going to promise the Queen of Darkness, Laurana. I mean, of all the bodies to inhabit, that would be a pretty awesome one. Laurana's amazing.
That or Goldmoon.
Yeah.
Goldmoon, the only human that elves considered beautiful.
Yeah.
So those were, I guess, the best candidates for this.
For sure.
If you may.
Yeah.
If someone wants to be a candidate for being inhabited by the Queen of Darkness.
Yeah. Yeah. Not one I would volunteer for, but I certainly appreciate the idea of it. Yeah.
I'm sure there are crazy people out there that would be happy to give their
Definitely.
lives.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there's priests. Mina. Mina was willing to later on. She's like, no, take my body. Yeah, so...
I like Mina.
Yeah. So Tanis goes with the companions and ultimately meets up with Fizban in order to then, go to God's home and, unfortunately lose Flint, but then proceed to Naraka with the Everman in order to try to barter or rescue Laurana.
I want to bring one thing up.
Yeah.
When Tess meets Fizban in the Silver Dragon Mountain, and he tells Fizban, and he's so happy to see him, and he says, I thought you died, I saw you die. And Fizban turns to him, was there a big funeral? And he says, no. So he turns around disappointed. No one came to my funeral.
Yeah. Fizban is such a fun character. Tracy Hickman and Margaret Weiss used him twice in non-Dragonlance trilogies.
Really?
Yeah, they had to change his name from Fizban to Fanbiz and stuff like that because of legal issues. But they used him in some other trilogies. It's really funny.
That's awesome. Well, he is Paladine after all, so he is the supreme god of good.
Yeah, for sure.
But his reaction to his death,
yeah,
no one came to my funeral.
I was hoping for a little more fanfare, but okay.
This is not fair. And I died in feathers.
Yeah,
the meetup with him and the ancient gold dragon that's as old as Fizban himself.
Yeah. That was funny because the dragon was just like, why do I have to listen to this old man? Like, what am I doing?
Yeah, and he kicks him in the ribs and makes him fly off.
Yeah, it was that. Really funny.
He turns him into the tiny gold dragon statue, and he gives it to Tess.
Yeah, I mean, talk about the ultimate get out of jail free card.
Oh my god, yeah! Wouldn't we all want a statue of a gold dragon?
Ancient definitely. Gold dragon? Yeah, I'd be like the kid from Neverending Story, chasing down bullies and just having a great time. Be fun. So Tanis ends up in the room with all the High Lords, feeling the presence of the Dark Queen herself. This is where I felt like we really got the gravity, the power of the Dark Queen, when even Tanis was like inclined to worship her, not because he loved her or he liked her, but because she's a god. Like
this is the first time where they show you the sheer presence of a god.
Yeah.
They talk about dragon fear. They talk about the fear that Lord Soth has. Mm-hmm. This is a god, and everyone around her. Doesn't matter what creature you are, you want to drop to your knees and worship her.
Yeah, and the fact that she's not even fully there yet. She hasn't even stepped through the door yet, and she's already emanating that much power and authority. Oh, yeah. It just really put everything into perspective. And we got that great moment of Tanis walking up to Lord Ericus and Raistlin whispering, strike him now! Strike him now!
Because he tries to strike him once and fails. And then he hears in his head, strike him now. I mean, the ball's on him to strike him again.
Yeah.
After he tried, failed, and put his sword on the ground.
This better work. You better know what you're doing, man.
Yeah, because this time he won't forgive me and ask me to bend the knee. He will kill me on the spot.
No, that was great. And then another really controversial moment of Laurana not willing to go with him and still thinking just for that moment that he's still on the bad guy's side. And that, for me, is a bridge too far. I could not believe that for 1 second. She just gave everything up to rescue him, and then suddenly out of nowhere he shows up, and she doesn't believe him? Like, I couldn't get there.
She didn't give up everything to rescue him. She gave up everything to see him dying.
Right.
She still thought that he was on the side of evil. She just wanted to say goodbye. and then she sees that he is on the side of evil, holding the crown of power after he killed Arikans. I mean, wouldn't you think that he's still evil?
It's so hard for me to get there in my head because, of course, I'm reading the stories, the truth of everything. I cannot believe that a woman who would literally forsake her own culture and family after this man would then, at the end, push him away. Like, I just couldn't believe it. She knew that he loved her even when he completely rejected her over and over again. And then they have these tiny little brief moments, and she continues going with his best friends because she believes that he's going to be there, and she's going to prove that she's worthy for him. And then at the end, for her just to turn, like, I just can't. In my head, I can't. I understand the arguments for it, and I certainly, I've had people like scream type at me that I'm wrong and everything, and I can appreciate the other perspectives. But from a character standpoint, I think if she left the army just to see him die and to see him alive, that would be enough for her to question Kiryara's motives. And then why would she ever trust Kiryara's truth anyway?
Never trust her. She knew that Kiryara is only there to manipulate her, and she knew that Kiryara was a manipulative little bitch.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
No, but yeah, you're right.
So yeah, I agree with you that she should have gone with him.
Yeah, ultimately it didn't last long. I mean, she ran away. Tanis chased her, and then when finally focused, we're going all the way back to the very beginning of our conversation with Kiryara, Laurana, and Tanis at the beginning of Dragonlance being formed by Tracy and Laura Hickman. They are at the very end of the War of the Lance, and it is who you gonna choose, Tanis? Who is it?
It feels like they're the soul, the beating soul of this entire thing.
For sure.
Because you have Kiryara, that she is lawful evil. You have Laurana, that she is, well, more chaotic good.
Yeah.
And then Tanis is smack in the middle.
Yeah.
And that's where he always was. And even after the war, after she dies, him and Laurana are living together. They have a child. He is still thinking about Kiryara.
Yep.
And I think it is in Second Generation where he does talk about that.
Yeah. I mean, they include that in the novel or in the source book, campaign source books as well, where he always thought about her. His heart was always with Laurana when they got married, and he was always devoted to her, but he always thought about Kiryara. And that's what we do as human beings. You can't help but reflect on whether it's your first love or the first person that scorned you or a relationship that meant something to you in some way. You will always think about those people no matter what. It's just they helped, they made a moment in your life that either changed you or affected you in some way. And so it's natural that you're going to reflect on that.
100%. And also, they were his heart, both of them. And he was always split down the middle.
Yep.
While this is happening up in the temple, in the dungeons, the group are screwed. They're in the dungeons. Finally, the Kiryara second in command understands that, oh yeah, Barum is down there. That's who he was.
Mm-hmm.
And he runs down to get him out, to present him to the Queen of Darkness, and he's killed. They were able to subdue him and the Draconians.
Yeah, this is where we see Raistlin at his greatest.
Oh my god.
He's like, I don't need you anymore, brother. I got this.
After he takes over Vizdantantilus, when he is trying to feed off of him with the soul gem, he puts it on his chest, and Raistlin is able to tear it off of his chest and put it on Vizdantantilus's. That's amazing.
I just love the conflict there.
Finally, Raistlin is free.
Yeah.
But Caramon is never, ever free.
Yeah, Caramon's a tragic figure. I mean, ultimately, we see the reflection of Raistlin after he realizes the mistakes that he made and everything after Legends, where he does come to appreciate his brother infinitely more. He's always loved him, but his ambition always got in the way. Caramon, he always suffered. And, even when he had those moments of joy and happiness with his family, with Tika and their children, he was always tormented with the idea of his brother. Like he literally had PTSD from growing up with Raistlin.
And he had Raistlin's room was always prepared.
Yeah, it's so great.
If barred, but always prepared. He could never let go. Tika was trying to take Raistlin's place, and when they were stuck in the bottom of the Blood Sea in Ishtar, they started to get a lot better. They were connected, and everything was a lot happier. And then they came to the surface, and all that ended.
Yeah.
It's like Raistlin only depended on Caramon physically. Caramon depended on Raistlin mentally and with his whole soul, with his whole being.
Yeah.
Like you said, that's where Raistlin really shows his true colors. After he took over Fizz and Tantalus, this decimating hordes of Draconians and assassins that come down there to stop them, it was beautiful.
Yeah, and ultimately the temple starts to break down. We see the heroes eventually escape and kind of regroup with Fizban, who then reveals who and what he actually is.
I was scared that Tess is going to die over there.
Yeah.
Both him and Tika. They were both in grave danger.
I mean, he did die, right?
Yeah, I mean, if it was in D&D, he would have been throwing death saves.
Yeah.
He just died. So you're still throwing death saves, hoping that you're not going to roll a natural one and die. And that's where Raistlin comes along, kills all of their pursuers, saves Tess, and says, "My debt to you is complete."
Yeah,
It was like Raistlin was going around and giving his farewells,
for sure.
paying all of his debt so he doesn't owe anything to anyone, and then closing the book on that chapter and moving on.
Yeah, it was pretty beautiful.
It was. And when they all meet and Fizban actually tells them who he is and why he didn't intervene. I mean, on the one hand, he did.
He pushed him for sure.
He nudged them in the right direction. He
Yeah.
saved Tess when the chain was burning in Vaxtaros. He helped them along, and he told Silvara. That's where we found out that he was
Yep.
actual god. In the second book, when they were in the Silver Dragon Mountain, when he told Silvara, yes, okay, you could teach him about the Dragonlance.
Yeah, you got to tell him the truth.
Yep. Funny thing is, they were not true Dragonlances because they didn't have the hammer.
Oh yeah, they were the lesser.
Yeah, lesser Dragonlances. And think what they could have done with actual true Dragonlances.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, ultimately they won anyway, but yeah.
Ultimately, they won. It took them 7 years, if I remember correctly, to push evil as far as they can east and south, so they will be out of the main territories of Ansalon. And they gave up. They didn't give up, but after they pushed them as far as they could, they understood that they can't continue fighting, and they have to go back home and start rebuilding. And that's where Tanis's true colors showed, when he started to broker the peace between the elves, dwarves, and humans.
Yeah.
But that is a story for another day. Adam, thank you very much for coming. I really appreciated this. I love this talk.
I had a great time. Thank you so much for having me.
Maybe we'll do this again sometime.
I'd love to. Just let me know.
So that is it for today, guys. Thank you very much for staying with me until the end. I hope you have a great day, and we'll see you in the next video. Stay safe out there.